When you set out to set your goals, are you well-rounded? Or do you tend to focus mainly on perhaps one area of your life? What am I talking about? Well, when you start looking into productivity, goal setting, thinking about what you want your future to like, designing your life, anything like that. The first element is to define the areas of your life. Why? Because, like I mentioned right in the beginning, we tend to not be well-rounded. I personally tend to super focus on the work area, on the hobbies area, kind of on the physical area, I guess, and definitely on the intellectual area. I absolutely ignore a lot of the rest, and I'm sure you too ignore something. So let's talk first about the idea of areas of your life. Now, any person who talks about productivity will define them. There are people like Zig Ziglar and Michael Hyatt and many others who do put out lists of what they think of as areas of your life. Because I'm such a fan of Michael Hyatt's planner, tend to follow along with what his areas are with a slight modification. I merge marital and parental because I do not have children, and I call it familial because in my life I want to spend as much attention on my siblings as my necessarily husband or children, and it just didn't seem that that fit into social. So I will run through the list that I use, but I want you to know that it is up to you what your list is. Just make sure that you're not creating a list with only the things that you like to pay attention to and ignoring some of those other areas. Why is it bad to ignore them? Well, when we do ignore the other areas of our life, that is what can make us feel out of balance, can make us feel like there's something missing in our lives. If there is, let's say, some part that you do not at all subscribe to. So for example, spiritual is a hot button topic for many people. I think of spiritual as meditation, as quiet time for me. That's when I tend to have my most introspective thought, things like that. It does not have to be an organized religion or something like that. So don't necessarily erase things without thinking about the deeper meaning of them right off the bat. Most people tend to go with 5 to 12 categories. It's up to you. I think it's Zig Ziglar talks about that the areas of your life make up the spokes of a wheel. And if you have one area that's much too short, your wheel's going to be wonky and not roll very well. That's the idea that we're thinking about. We're just thinking about how to make sure that when we are setting out to set goals and we are planning our weeks, our months, our quarters, our years, that we are making sure that we are saying, hey, am I focusing on all of my areas of my life? I say that with the caveat that sometimes you need to focus more on a certain area. Let's say you're starting a business. Well, your work is going to be really heavy at that point in that one area. Let's say you just had a baby. You're going to be very focused on that familial while your baby is in its little infancy stages. Let's say you are training to run a marathon. Well, then physical is going to be where you're focusing. Let's say you are studying to get into grad school or you're in grad school. Well, intellectual is going to be a little bit heavier at that time. So you don't have to have things even, but it's a great idea too when you're doing your planning, especially your monthly, quarterly, yearly, that you're looking at your areas and saying, did I do anything for some of these last year? I wish I had. That's the point. All right, the 9 areas that I use and I refer to when I am putting together things like my 21 in 2021 list or thinking about what I want my priorities to be over the next quarter are 1, intellectual, 2, emotional. That is like psychological, let's say. So as being a secret introvert, that's a lot of making sure that I schedule downtime in if I'm going to be doing speaking or things like that. I'll explain them as I go. Intellectual would be reading, studying, furthering your mind in some capacity. 3, physical, so obvious. Exercise, moving. It doesn't have to be like hardcore exercise, but we know we all need to move a little bit. So maybe that's walking or getting out there and moving around. 4, familial. So this merges your marital, your parental, your family beyond that, parents, siblings, cousins, whatever you'd like, making sure that you're having the relationships that you desire. Where are we? Are we at 5? 5, Social. I think I'm like switching my hands back and forth. Social would be your friends, the groups that you're part of, getting out there and being part of a community. 6 is spiritual. As I touched on in the beginning, that does not have to be an organized religion of some sort. It could be just a spiritual practice that you have. A lot of people will think of meditation and yoga in this area. 7th is vocational. What does vocational mean? It means your work. So if you're a small business owner, you're probably going to be a little heavy on this one. Or if you're somebody that is really working their way up in the corporate world, it may be heavier at times. And some of you, if you're retired, it may be not even on your list anymore. But that is definitely an area we all need to have on there if we are working. 8 is avocational. So those are the hobbies. Mine also overlap. My favorite hobby is reading, which also goes under intellectual. So sometimes you'll do a task and it goes into both. I also have for my hobbies, hanging out with my friends, going on walks and talks. Even during COVID, I've been able to walk around the lake, kind of distancing with friends, and it's walks around the yard are in that. It's also my jigsaw puzzles, which to me are very important. Also, I would almost say it's almost spiritual because I zone out and it can go into the intellectual. So see the overlap here. And 9th is financial, and that is your personal and family finances. I mean, your work finances also could go in there. Pretty obvious what financial is. So when you sit down next to start planning out what you want to be getting done, you want to be thinking about where your priorities are, it's always great to glance at this list, to have it somewhere that you can say, oh, I really intended to be perhaps more social this year, or to develop some new hobbies, or to make sure that I am touching on that emotional area of my life and not just focusing on, let's say, work or things like that all the time. So now you have a list of where to start. You can always Google areas of your life. You'll see a lot of them come up, put out by different thought leaders and productivity, but it is a wonderful reminder to make sure that you are setting goals beyond the things that you always go to and more into those areas of your life that you perhaps want to strengthen. This has been another business tip from me, Sierra Bailey of Doers, Shakers, Makers. Hey, are you in our Facebook group? Come and join us, Doers, Shakers, Makers on Facebook. It's free. We'd love to have you. It's a great way to talk about your goals and how you want to live your life. Thank you so much for watching this week. I will see you next Tuesday.